Welcome to the Kickass Couples Podcast. This is the place where we help committed couples who want to level up their marriage experience newfound clarity, hope, and confidence. We're Matthew and Kim, co-hosts and husband and wife.
In 26 years together, we've seen a lot and never thought it could be as good as it is right now. We're here to help you successfully navigate the messy, dirty, and wonderful world of marriage.
We believe all couples deserve and are capable of experiencing an extraordinary and fulfilling marriage. And each week, we're bringing you life lessons from real-life successful couples to help you grow and strengthen your relationship.
We'll get started right after this message. If you want to learn how to experience the best, most fulfilling year of your marriage, we invite you to pre-order Matthew's new book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. You can get it at MatthewPHoffman.com. Again, that's MatthewPHoffman.com. And now, back to the show.
Welcome, everybody, to this recap episode for Mayor Frank and Teresa Hibbard. This was episode 13, and we are going to get into some good pearls and nuggets and some of those key things that we thought was great about this interview and talk about that just a little bit. Kim, do you want to start us off? What struck you about the Hibbards, or what do you remember? What rock?
Well, they came out first and foremost by saying what was most important in their relationship was balance and the support that they give each other, especially when they're having a rough time. And another thing that they said right away, right out of the gate was, we see it as nothing is failing. We keep going. Nothing is failing. We keep moving forward. And then they bring a lot of laughter when they move forward. So I feel like, right from the get-go, they established that we've got good balance. When we're having a tough time, we support each other, and we make our relationship a priority by saying, nothing is completely failing here. We're going to fix it. We're going to keep going, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to move on.
Right. And I think that's important for everybody. Any couple is going to benefit from the things that they came out swinging with right away, which I love. They got right to it. And I think if you haven't listened to the episode yet, Frank Hibbard is a mayor. He's a mayor of Clearwater, Florida, one of America's #1 beaches, I think, the three years of the last 5 years running, and his wife, Teresa. So he has 2 full-time jobs. He's a mayor, right, full-time job, and he's a financial planner as well. And his wife also works full-time for the Salvation Army. So you want to talk about juggling 3 careers between 2 people, and they've got to have balance. They've got to have that focus. Otherwise, they're just not going to be able to work in that relationship. They do have kids. They're grown, so they're empty nesters, and they're both servants of the community. So I think that focus is huge, and learning how to prioritize their time. And Mayor Hibbard had a great quote that I want to share with you all. He said about first things first is you have to learn how to give up on the good and save time for the great on a daily basis. Because he said it's so easy in their lives with 3 careers, public servants, you can always accept the good. But when you do that, you miss out on the great. So he said they've become pros at learning how to prioritize that time for themselves and making sure that they're saving room for the great for each other in their relationship.
And how do you do that, right? I mean, that requires a lot of communication, I think, between a couple, so that they can really sit down and determine, while we have so many good things here that we want to do, we just don't have all the time and energy and resources to do all of them. What are the great things? How do we prioritize?
Absolutely. And so I think that one thing I've had to learn in our relationship, and one of my favorite quotes is, just because you can doesn't mean you should. When people ask you something, it might be a family member, could even be your spouse, a business partner. Hey, can you, will you? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And you've got to really make sure that you're reserving the best for that relationship. Because if you're not, you get in the leftovers. Nobody likes leftovers all the time.
Yeah, it's hard to say no, especially when there's so many great things that you can be, or good things that you can be involved in. So you really are trying to sift through and find the great things. And I go back to there being 3 people in a relationship, right? there's you and there's me and there's we. So is this good for the we?
The us, yeah.
The us.
The us has got to take priority.
Exactly.
And I think that's when a lot of people run into problems in relationships is when, one of our key focus is what's unique about us, and what we do is we learn, teach, and preach prioritization. And if you're not prioritizing your spouse as your number one relationship, it's just not going to go well. I don't know anybody that has a kick-ass relationship that hasn't learned how to prioritize their spouse. I know that I feel like you do that for me in our relationship, and I certainly strive to do that for you. And I don't have all the answers. I think we're both learning, and it's fun to hear, like with Teresa and Frank, what they did and how they had to figure out that prioritization. And I think a lot of that kind of went back to learning from their family of origin.
It did, definitely. Teresa's family of origin was love does. Everything that they did in her family of origin was in the doing, right?
Acts of service, right?
There was routine. There was, lots of acts of service. Her dad traveled a lot. He wasn't around very much. And so I think that for Teresa, when she came to the marriage, love was in doing.
Right. And so that was and how did that affect her? Was it important to her to say, okay, I got to make sure that I do in love, or did that have the opposite effect on her where she said, I need to get something different from this relationship?
Yeah. I mean, I think that for her, it wasn't in the doing. I feel like, she made a claim that her love language was words of affirmation. And that's what she needed. She really needed to hear, I'm appreciated, I'm respected, and she just needed to feel like she was important.
Yeah, Mayor Hibbard said he had to learn how to give her those words because he's a doer and he likes to solve things. He jumps in, he's a solutions guy, and so that was a new twist for him. And his background, his family of origin was a little different. He said that he really struggled. He was the youngest of 6. He said, I was the oops because there was a gap of 8 years between number 5 and him. And I think that his dad was an alcoholic, and that really shaped a lot of his experience growing up and made it incredibly difficult. On the good side, he saw how strong his mom was because she had to deal with that, but it was an awesome story of redemption. You got to listen to this episode, guys, because his dad, figured out after 25 years of being alcoholic, he overcame it, and then it was a love story. So he got to see his dad redeem and model what love and dedication looked like to his mom for the last 20 years of their life. And that really had a lot to do for him in modeling what he needed to get from Teresa. And so it's a great story, and learned a lot and really set up what he expected. And it led to Frank learning how to be thoughtful, and selfless for Teresa. And one of the things that Teresa said about Frank is that he's so generous with his time and giving to others. And he really learned how to do that from his mom and then ultimately from his dad.
Yeah. When we talked to them about commitment, what really stood out to me was, they both make a proactive decision to choose to commit to each other each day, each and every day. They make that verbal commitment to each other that, it's a new day and we're going to schedule time together. There's a lot of push and pull on our relationship, and, we're going to choose to be there for each other.
I think that's important. It may sound simple and funny, but we do this. The Hibbards do this. A lot of the kick-ass couples we talk to, you schedule time with your spouse. You put it on the calendar. If that's a weekly date, hopefully you're getting out at least once a week, or that's our goal anyways, just to have adult time, the two of us, once a week when we can. But their schedule necessitates they have to schedule it, and they block it out. And neither of them know they can roll over, erase, or wipe out that time because they know they have to have it together. And so they schedule that time. So it sounds like such a simple thing, but putting it on the calendar and committing to it and scheduling it means that you're carving it and making sure that you're feeding and nourishing that relationship.
Absolutely. And her comment about that also was that Frank's loyal to me stands out when that happens, right? He's loyal to me in any situation.
He goes to bat for her. I think that's one of the things that under commitment that she knows he's committed to her because he goes up and takes the bullets on anything. He's a fixer, and that's his job. But also they've agreed on that. So he didn't just take that role, and she said, well, gosh, I guess this is how we're going to have it. But they agreed and got agreement on it, and he's happy to do that. That's his love language. That's his forte. And he comes to that, and that makes her feel that commitment and gives her the security so they can go forward through the rest of their relationship.
And that kind of leads into the communication part. What did they do for, how did they communicate? What did you notice? What stood out to you?
Well, I think that one of the things they did, and I think Frank started this in their relationship, is he makes sure, as busy as they are, and since they're both working full time away from one another, they have a check-in at least once a day. He'll call, he'll text, and just say, hey, how's the day going? How you doing? How did that project come out? Or, oh, this is what happened to me. And it's funny because Teresa said, there's days that go by, like Frank hasn't called me yet. And she would call him and say, you haven't called me yet. And he would remind her and say, hey, there's phone calls both ways. Doesn't always have to be initiating. And it's not if one spouse does something in a relationship, it doesn't mean that they always have to do it, right? It can come. It's a good habit on both sides. And so he reminded her and she agreed, I can call, I can text. And so they have that daily touch base at least once, sometimes more than that. And Teresa was really sweet because she said, when I don't get it, I miss it. And I wonder where it is. And that gives her the impetus or the impulse to call and say, how's it going, Frank? What's going on in your day? Because maybe he needs that support from her.
Yeah, it's such an affirmation, I believe, of their commitment to each other.
When it comes to creating a kick-ass marriage, do you ever wonder how you're doing? We found that there are 13 key components that make up a thriving relationship, which is why we've created the Kickass Assessment. In this powerful free tool, you'll learn what they are and how you and your spouse are ranking in each one. And you'll get recommendations that will help you start improving today. To get your results, simply visit MatthewPHoffman.com. Again, that's MatthewPHoffman.com. It's time to start kicking ass. Let's go. I think so. So one of the things that, when we kind of move out of communication, Kim, and into conflict resolution, what did you see? One of the things that I think they mentioned was, Teresa talked about irritability and like what happens when one of the spouses is just not having a good day.
And I think that's common with people who have two really high pressured jobs. You come home and sometimes rather than giving the best to your spouse, you're giving them sort of the leftovers. And I think what they have learned is that it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to give each other some grace, to extend that olive leaf and say, it's okay that you had a bad day. I understand what you're feeling right now. And that sort of diffuses an argument or conflict before it even begins.
I agree. Frank had a great quote. He goes, don't be the bomb. He goes, you don't want to be the one that walks in and explodes and sends shrapnel flying and, there's carnage and people are getting injured in the relationship. And he said, if you diffuse it before it happens, then what you're doing is you're maintaining the harmony and you're not allowing the carnage, right, to be there. Because there's always going to be struggles and things that people are striving to do. But I think, one of the things he said is that he's in public service, right? So he is smiling and shaking hands and really has, he again and again and again, he is forced to be pleasant and respectful and loving, even when he may not be getting that from somebody else. So a question that he asked, he said, am I treating the people I love the most as well as those that are closest to me? Because, he goes, my wife, I love her, my kids, my in-laws, my family. He goes, if I'm not treating them better than the strangers, that's a problem. And that's going to create issues in the relationship. And I love that. So that's a question that, everybody, we can all ask ourselves. Are we treating the ones we love the most as good as or better than the strangers we interact and come into contact with every day?
Yeah, we have to be really mindful of not giving them the leftovers. Again, what's sort of left of us at the end of the day. We should be trying to really give them our very best.
Yeah.
That's hard to do.
It is.
It's a hard thing to do. Another thing that in conflict resolution that they brought up was being really mindful about bringing things up from the past. You need to throw those things away.
Yeah, history. I think
Put them
history.
to bed.
Teresa had an expression, bring your upper. In other words, oh, you're doing the bring your upper. You're hauling out of the past, and really that has to do with forgiveness, right? And we've all been hurt by those we love, those we don't love. People may be total strangers to us, but when we rehash or think of it as going to the dump and getting your trash and bringing it back and throwing it all over the place where you are right now. You would never go to the dump and look for trash you threw out weeks, months, or even years ago. So if you're not going to do it in your home, why would you do it in your relationship? And I think that she brought that up, and Frank said he agreed that you can't go back for that trash.
Yeah. And then, if we moved on to other pillars, one that Teresa brought up that was most important to her is trust and honesty. She really felt like that was an important factor in a relationship. And I know that, that's something that she values from Frank that he extends to her. He makes her feel safe. He makes her feel secure. And he makes her feel that she can trust him and that he is going to be really open and honest with everything with her.
Yeah, I think Frank said maybe to a fault, or Teresa said he's got brutal honesty,
Right.
and he's talked to people and worked with other couples, and they ask him what he thinks, or they ask him for help, and he said, one time I said to a couple, I don't know if you're going to make it, and he was pointing at one of the individuals. He said, because you're too selfish, right? And those are the things, and it wasn't said with malice. He wasn't
Right.
trying to hurt him, but he's being brutally honest and saying, guys, I'm concerned, and here's why. And I think that if you have that safety net of commitment in the relationship, then you can say those things lovingly with honesty, and you don't have to sugarcoat it or dance around it and be selective of what you say to your spouse, because they need to hear it. And being willing to accept that influence is huge.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to his family of origin with his mom really portraying that selflessness when there was that 20-year struggle with his father. He recognized that and sees that, and he really tries to implement that in his own relationship as well.
Yeah, and I think that Frank, when we were asking him about the pillars, we have 13 pillars, by the way, if you're not aware. We've talked about these on and off in our podcast. You can find those 13 pillars at MatthewPHoffman.com. And we think there are 13 pillars of successful kick-ass relationships. And we always talk about the 3 C's: commitment, communication, and conflict resolution as that foundation. And Teresa talked about trust and honesty. And I think as Frank was looking over the list, he said, you know what? They're all important. The challenge is, how do you take all of these, combine them, and infuse your relationship with these pillars? Because if you're not focusing on them, or you haven't, or you're weak in those areas, or really maybe not sure how they're showing up in your relationship, it's an opportunity. And I think that he said that they work to go through those and make sure they're present in their relationship. So he said the challenge is to combine them and make sure they're present.
I want to talk a little bit about the advice that they would give to their unmarried selves.
Sure. What did you learn there?
So, Frank said, have realistic expectations. It's not like the movies. And I think a lot of us go into it thinking happily ever after, right? And it's not that simple. It's hard work, and it takes everybody working, or both partners working each and every day hard.
Yeah, it's a commitment. Yeah, there's no plan B, right?
No plan B.
No plan B. And I think that's a theme that you're going to hear again and again and again. Successful relationships and people that are committed, there's no plan B. It's not like, well, we'll hang out here unless, right? And we've always said that if there's infidelity or abuse of any kind, those are things that can really rock and maybe ruin or dissolve a relationship. But outside of the commitment issue, if there's commitment, there really is nothing. You're going to work it through, right? You're going to work it through and figure it out on how it has to happen. And I think that, one thing that I don't think we mentioned yet, Kim, is that the Hibbards talked about getting outside help, right? They talked about when things are tough or not going well, or if they're struggling in something, that they don't have all the answers, and they're willing and they have looked to others to help give them that perspective to work on things in their relationship. And I think kind of the greats that we've all talked to a T, have said, we need outside help, right?
Yeah, it's a reoccurring theme where a lot of our couples have said, we don't have all the tools. We don't have all the answers. And we have sought outside help to really give us some strategies and a plan on how to be better partners, to be better communicators.
Great advice and a good resource. And I think that, we've created Kickass Couples Nation as part of that, where we have on our website, you guys can go find out about a community that we've created for like-minded people, imperfect couples that want to level up. And there's all kinds of great resources that might be helpful to you to help achieve that. And, one kind of a closing thought I wanted to share that Teresa had, and she made the comment, she said, you got to understand the difference between happiness and contentment. She said, what are you choosing? She said, happiness is fleeting. If people are judging the quality of their relationship by, am I happy or not? She said, well, that's a choice, and circumstances change all day long, and you can decide I'm happy, I'm unhappy. But she said, what's more important is, are you content? And contentment means that you understand the relationship where it is, good or bad, but you're content in it because you're working, your spouse is working, and that contentment is something that you can choose and that you can have, where happiness is fleeting and malleable and changing all day long.
Yeah, this was a great episode. I really appreciated their openness and what they brought to the table during this interview. If you want to listen to it in its entirety, it is Frank and Teresa Hibbard, Mayor Frank and Teresa Hibbard.
You can find that on Matthew P. Hoffman or wherever your favorite podcasts are listed. And we thank you guys for coming to this recap. Come check us out, like us, subscribe. And if you found any value in this podcast or any others, please forward it to a friend so we can share the love, share the wealth, and keep on going. And remember, at the end of the day, that happily ever after does not just happen.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Kickass Couples Podcast. If you like the content of this show, you'll love Matthew's upcoming book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. To receive a digital mini book of quotes and images from the book, all you have to do is rate this show and leave a review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen. Then email us a screenshot of your review at podcast@kickasscouplespodcast.com, and we'll get it over to you right away.
Until next time, remember, happily ever after doesn't just happen, it's on purpose.